very own Emerson, Kathy Middleman. Thank you, Kathy. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous song. So we all know the truth that there is really no such thing as stillness, right? Even as I try to sit on my meditation cushion, not moving my arms or my legs, I'm aware of the subtle movements of my body. They continue. There's the perpetual beat of my heart. There's the expansion and contraction of my chest with the breath. Stillness isn't absolute. And nature shows us this as well. There's no such thing as stillness. Even in the most calm of the days, there's always that ripple of activity. Creatures crawling, flowers blooming even just ever so slowly. Air, water, they all seem to have a movement about them. So let's start there in our conversation about stillness, that there's no such thing as absolute stillness. That is, if one defines stillness, as we often do, as the act of having no movement. But that's not the stillness I want to talk about today. I want to talk about another kind of stillness, one that I think we all innately crave at one time or another. I'll tell you, some mornings I lay in my bed after my husband has taken his leave and set off in the dark morning drive for his workplace, and I'm fully awake, but not ready for that cascade of my own activity to begin. I can't put it in words, but I'm waiting for something. It's waiting inside this stillness. And I just know it calls me there. And of course, I love my life. I love all the things I get to do. I know a warm cup of tea is waiting for me downstairs when I get up. And I know that there's tons of projects that I'm involved in that are just waiting for me. And I love them all. But some mornings, I notice I'm just called to wait in this stillness, in this partial stillness. And I wait until that subtle magic of that moment is pierced, usually from my phone tweeting, reminding me that while I'm sitting there in stillness and while I slept, the world was continuing to unfold and there were going to be things that needed my focus. And so I rise and I go about my day. But part of me always throughout my day holds out that desire for stillness, that stillness that I was just about to touch. I wonder if you know what I mean. Do you have those moments where you feel like you're reaching out for stillness? I think it seems especially true this time of year. I don't think it's just the coolness in the air that keeps me under the blankets. I think it's something more. I think there's something about this time of year that reminds me that this still place has a great gift inside of it. Now, last week, Reverend Anthony Johnson spoke about wisdom beautifully, and finding wisdom, not in the gathering of facts, but in allowing wisdom to be touched from all the different sources of wisdom, all the different places in our lives. And I think that we intuitively know that inside of stillness is one of those places of wisdom. So how do we find it? Well, lately a group of us in the Transforming Hearts workshop have been talking about this iceberg principle. That's the idea that in any situation, what is known and seen and recognized is only the tip of the iceberg to what is really there. You know, it's estimated that only 1/10 of an iceberg is actually seen above water. 1/10. So that means to really see an iceberg, to get to know an iceberg, one must go way down under the water, sometimes really deep down under the water. Now, I've never seen an iceberg under the water. Actually, I don't think I've ever seen one above water. And I actually have never even been scuba diving. But I can tell you that through my experiences doing some snorkeling and swimming and dunking my head under the water in the tub, don't laugh, I know you've done it, maybe not recently, but as a kid. we recognize that there's this kind of stillness under the surface of that water, and it intrigues me. Because I think we can also sense this in ourselves as well, that underneath the iceberg of our busy lives, all that busyness, there lays so much more of us to get to know. Underneath the 10% of life that we express, there's 90% of who we really are. Underneath the 10% of the knowledge we possess about life is 90% more wisdom that is waiting for us to touch it. And I think we know this and we crave the stillness so that we can access it. We crave putting our heads under the water to discover what is there. Now, I must tell you a story right now about Jake. Jake was a retriever, a golden retriever, and Jake loved his family, but on occasion Jake would go missing. Now, it turns out that Jake would wander over to the neighbor's house many afternoons. Now, he didn't dig up the flower beds or stand on the porch and bark for treats. Jake would just go to the back porch where there was sun and lie down for a while. Now, the folks whose house Jake would visit were concerned that Jake's owners would be worried about him. So one day they attached a note to Jake's collar. They said, "Hi, your dog comes to our house most afternoons. He's okay, but we just thought you would want to know." Well, it turns out the next day, Jake returned to his afternoon sunspot, and to the neighbor's surprise, there was a new note on Jake's collar. They took the note off, and this is what it read. "Hi, my name is Jake. I live in a house with 3 kids. I come here to get some rest. My owner wants to know if she can come with me some days." Yes, we can all relate to Jake and his owner, and I think Dominic is shaking his head up there. Whatever the busyness in our lives, we all dream of that quiet break. We crave some stillness. But here's this tricky thing about stillness I've discovered. Because the water under the surface, especially that deep down water, that can also be a little scary, can it? So also, too, I find that when we slow down, when we stop the busyness, when we allow ourselves time to find that underwater stillness of ourselves, we don't always know what we're going to find there, do we? Sometimes we may have an inkling of what could be down there, and we conclude that some sea monsters are better left unpoked, so we stay busy. And so we have this push-pull relationship with stillness, I think. On one hand, we are like Jake, and we want to just find some place we can rest. But on the other hand, if we were to be still, if we were to rest, if we were to allow ourselves to dive a little way under the water's surface, under the surface of our lives, we may fear whether we can deal with what we find there. Hurts, fears, disappointments, self-judgments, that nagging feeling that a particular thing in our life must change. These are often under the surface of our lives. And they take great gentleness to be with. They take great gentleness to be willing to discover. But it also turns out that under the surface of our lives is often some of the most precious gifts, our wisdom, our intuition, our sense of direction, our answers to the big questions of who we are and what we are doing here. And it is in the stillness itself that we can find the source of the healing for those other things we find underneath the surface, because they are there together. In his book, Time Wars, Jeremy Rafkin says, "We have surrounded ourselves with time-saving technology, gadgetry, only to be overwhelmed by plans that cannot be carried out, appointments that cannot be honored, schedules that cannot be fulfilled, and deadlines that cannot be met." What is the purpose of managing our days more efficiently if we don't understand the meaning of our days? So much, I think so much of who we are is left unlived. It's left unlived when we don't take that time to meet ourselves in the place of stillness. So much of our lives are missed when we focus on that top 10%. One of my favorite authors, John O'Donohue, speaks about stillness, and he speaks about it in relation to aging, really beautifully. He says, "Stillness is vital to the world of the soul. If as you age, you become more still, you will discover that stillness can be a great companion. The fragments of your life will have time to unify. The places where your soul shelter is wounded or broken will have time to knit and heal. You will be able to return to yourself. In stillness," he adds, "you will engage your soul." Many people miss out on themselves completely as they journey through life. They know others, they know places, they know skills, they know their work. But tragically, they do not know themselves at all. Aging can be a lovely time of ripening when you actually meet yourself, indeed, maybe for the first time. You know, it's often not until that physical aging starts that it induces this need for more stillness or this desire or willingness to have some stillness. But I think stillness is accessible at any age. There's this wonderful video I saw of some children. It was them talking about their experience with anger and how to deal with it. And there was this one little girl, she must have been all of 7 or 8 years old, and she tells of how her emotions are like, she says it's like if you took a jar of water and put glitter in it and shook it up. And she said all that glitter all over the place, that's like her mind when she's angry. And then she goes on to say that if she sits still, just like if you put the jar down, that the glitter begins to settle to the bottom of the jar and the water becomes clear. And in the video, she says how much she likes that feeling. Obviously, the kids in the video were kids that were taught meditation because it's a beautiful practice to help calm the glitter. I love that visual. Now, I'm imagining right now you have several ways that you could name. Maybe meditation is one of them, but maybe there's other things that you can think of that induce this sense of stillness in you. Something that will help your glitter settle to the bottom of the jar. For you, maybe it's taking a quiet walk, sewing, watching a fire. Have you noticed how mesmerizing and still watching a fire can be? Or holding a sleeping baby. For me, looking at art can bring me to such a place of stillness. Perhaps for you, it's a poem or a piece of music that quiets you. In a few weeks, we're all going to sing Silent Night together while holding a candle and looking at a flame. And isn't it amazing how much stillness that seems to bring, that we all just love that ritual? When my girls were teenagers, I want to tell you, we had a backyard hot tub, and at least a few times a week on cold winter nights, one girl or the other and I would climb into the hot tub and we would look up at the stars and the clouds going past the stars and the still of the night. And our noses would be cold from the coldness in the air, but our bodies would be warm from the water. And inevitably, it took a very little time of sitting there in the stillness of the night that they would begin to open up and start chatting about their lives. And on more than one occasion, one of them would comment afterwards how they were surprised how much they shared or how much clearer they felt about a certain thing they were wondering about in their life or working with in their life. And so we began calling it the hot tub truth serums. I believe it was the stillness of the moment. I believe it was the hush of the air outside. I believe it was the safety of the warmth of the water that helped them in those moments become still and dive deeper underneath the surface of their lives. Stillness is a gateway to the deeper part of ourselves, deeper part of ourselves that are not normally seen or experienced. And it's also a gift that we can give others. I want to close with this story from the Buddhist teacher Tara Brach. It's of a woman who is spending the evening with her mother when her mother sat her down and told her that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And the woman says that the initial shock was really intense, and she says that she quickly went into planning mode. Her head was spinning. She wanted to know what was going to happen next. She wanted to make a list of all the treatment options. She wanted to know how soon they could remove the lump. Rather than pausing, she says that she was going into control mode. So this was the daughter going into like this control mode, trying to figure it all out. But then she says she took a moment and she looked over at her mother. And she realized that her mother was not rushing around. Her mother was not making lists or going on Google. Her mother didn't even want to talk. And the woman says, as I was weighing my options for her, whether it was going to be a biopsy or mastectomy, etc., she sat on the high-top chair in my kitchen, staring blankly into a cup of coffee. I was trying to be strong for her sake and mine, but it suddenly became clear that wasn't what she needed. She was scared, and she needed to be scared. Staying busy was my way of avoiding that feeling. It was my way of avoiding a total collapse. I realized that if I could join her in her stillness of that moment, it would be a far greater support to her. And then the woman says of her story, she says, I took a deep breath, I walked across the room, I wrapped my arms around her. She said it was an awkward sideways kind of hug, but it was long and it was necessary. And then she said something happened. Slowly, she said her mother started to rock from side to side, like a mother rocks a child, except the child was now the caretaker. She says it was a sweet moment I'll never forget, and one that I surely would have missed if it were not for my willingness to enter her stillness with her. Stillness is not something we have to go out and search for, but more stillness is something in the natural rhythms of life that we are invited to embrace. We just have to be willing to do a little diving. The word Advent means the arrival of something important. So I'm going to invite you during this season of Advent to give yourself permission to welcome the arrival of stillness. Stay in bed a little longer. Listen to music. Make a fire. Find a way to invite stillness into your life. And as you do, enjoy the deep dive into the hidden parts of yourself that have always been there and the wisdom that they will share with you. I'm confident you are going to be delighted by what you find there. Blessed be. Please join our hymn singers